Hello, creeps. It's me, John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper, and you're listening to Chronicles from the Crypt.
I'm Casualty Chris.
And this is Father Malone.
And we are the hosts of Chronicles from the Crypt, a twice-a-month look at the cult horror anthology series Tales from the Crypt that originally aired on HBO from 1989 to 1996.
Now, on each of these podcasts, we're going to be doing 2 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, and along the way, in between seasons, we do bonus episodes about some tangentially related tales, ephemera, sometimes very tangentially related.
Yes, like the last episode we did on The Monster Club, which was our bonus episode after Season 3 of the show ended. However, that is not what we are talking about now. It is not bonus episode time, folks. We are right back at it again. It is Season 4 of Tales from the Crypt, and we are talking about None But the Lonely Heart, and This'll Kill Ya.
Damn you, Marcel! I told you they wanted violence, not violins. Good help is so hard to find, isn't it, kiddies? Want a little more champagne? I hope you're hungry for tonight's murderous menu. It concerns a man who's discovered that the fastest way to a woman's heart is with a pickaxe. I call this tasty little hors d'oeuvre None But the Lonely Heart.
I'm shocked we're at Season 4 already.
I know. It is crazy we're at Season 4 already, but that's a good thing. So this episode, None But the Lonely Heart, aired June 27th, 1992. These first 2 episodes actually aired the same evening when that was a thing that HBO did with anthology shows or just shows in general. It is directed by Tom Hanks. Yes, that is right. That Tom Hanks. He's also in the episode. It stars Treat Williams, Francis Sternhagen, and Henry Gibson, along with Sugar Ray Leonard. Because reasons.
Yeah, I don't know, but okay.
And it focuses on Treat Williams, who plays a con man who marries older women, takes all their money, and then kills them through poisoning their wine. However, before we talk about the episode, I feel like we need to talk about something that I did not mention. Who wrote the episode? Donald Longtooth. Now, you might remember from Season 3, the episode The Reluctant Vampire, whose character name was Donald Longtooth. So I was doing some research into this. I would believe someone wrote this under a pen name.
Oh, could it be? Might it be Terry Black?
I believe so.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and I was like, oh, come on, dude.
Yeah, so this episode is written by Donald Longtooth. There's another episode this season written by Donald Longtooth. It is more than likely Terry Black.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and say this episode was written by Terry Black.
Yeah, but it's Donald Longtooth.
Oh, okay.
Sure, whatever. It's a little weird, whatever. I don't know why you're hiding your name. Don't know what the pen name is, whatever.
Because this episode is not as genuinely hilarious as his other one, so he needed to hide his identity.
So this episode is interesting. I actually like it until it gets into the kind of home stretch third act, and then I feel like it completely falls apart because it doesn't do what I thought it should have done, which would have, I think, made the episode a lot better.
Yeah, it seemed as if what we were looking at was sort of a double cross for the main character, right? I mean, did you sort of anticipate that Francis Sternhagen was putting one over on him?
Well, that's the thing. So obviously I've seen this episode so many times before, and I know that that's not going to be the case, but every time I watch it, and this is the third time I've seen it because I watched it a couple months back, just kind of getting ahead of myself, and then I watched it again, for this episode, and that's what I always anticipate, and that's what I always hope for, is that it's going to be Francis Sternhagen is putting one over on Treat Williams, and that's never the case, and I'm always disappointed because it's really what it feels like.
Yeah, it seems like it's locked and loaded into that particular plot contrivance. And I was down with it. I was also down with the idea of them subverting that. Like, they had set it up, knowing that we had been watching Tales from the Crypt for, 3 odd seasons so far, like, maybe they're going to go in a whole other direction. Unfortunately, the direction that they chose to subvert us with ended up being total garbage.
Total garbage.
Yeah, like irredeemable. They just, I mean, it does feel as if, like, this is how people remember Tales from the Crypt being, where a character does a horrible thing and then there's a supernatural comeuppance at the end. But it feels so unearned that it's I just can't get around it. Now, having said that, I did like most of the episode. Like, you said it yourself. Like, this is not. Tom Hanks is actually a pretty good director. Like, I don't think there's any
question of that, right? I mean, he's much better of a director than Michael J. Fox was. That's for sure.
Oh, certainly. And knows how to insert himself into an episode as a character without going, hey, it's me, Tom Hanks. Like, he felt like an organic part of the episode, and I really liked that.
Yeah, he's just there. I mean, in the Michael J. Fox episode, oh, God, with Lou Paloma, which I completely... Oh, God, what is the name of that episode? That was last season, too, of all things. Was it...
Stricken from my memory.
The Trap. The Trap. Yeah, that episode's real bad, and it doesn't help that Michael J. Fox has inserted himself into it in a very, like, oh, who is that talking kind of way. Yeah, and in this, it's just, oh, cool, Tom Hanks is in it. And Tom Hanks knows how to die, too. How often do you get to see Tom Hanks die? Not very often, but
yeah,
boy,
man,
he goes for it.
He really went for it. I thought the same thing while I was watching it. I haven't seen this episode in 30 some odd years, and all I could think was like, wow, you never get to see this guy die.
Especially not in a Stu Macher from Scream way where he gets his head thrown through a TV.
Yeah.
And then you get to and then you get to hear Tom Hanks just going just like for what seems like an inordinately long amount of time.
Pretty good. I mean, you know what? I mean, he's proven himself as a director anyway. I don't know what your feelings are about that thing you do, but I love that goddamn movie. I think I think he's a pretty solid filmmaker.
Never seen it.
Being what?
Sorry.
Oh my God. Okay.
I think I broke Father Malone, folks.
Yeah, it does not compute, sir. Like, you need to see that movie.
Do I?
Yeah, actually you do. Yeah, I think you're going to really like it.
But is it as good as None But the Lonely Heart?
It's 1,000 times better than None But the Lonely Heart. It wasn't written by Donald Longtooth, but it's still valid.
I do like this episode, but yeah, I do wish that there was some sort of expectation subversion at the end.
Certainly. Now, let me just mention some of the performers here. Our lead is Treat Williams. Always excellent Treat Williams.
Deep Rising
and ever.
Treat Williams.
Yeah, I know he was in that, but then again he was still...
Deep Rising is a fun movie. I think Deep Rising is stupid but fun. It's directed by Stephen Sommers, who directed The Mummy.
Sure, and he was Xander Drax in that the Phantom film, which is not a good movie, but he's a great villain in it. For me, Treat Williams will always be Berger from Hair, the musical, and. Just a couple of years later, he was not the lead, he was one of the ensemble for 1941, Steven Spielberg's film, where he's really good in that as sort of the main antagonist. And he's great here because he's a fucking great actor. So, like, I guess having Tom Hanks direct it was a good thing because they were able to get somebody of actual caliber. And let's not short shrift Frances Sternhagen, who is always great in everything she's been in. I don't know if she's still alive now, but she is amazing. I think people of my generation would probably recognize her most as Cliff Clavin's mom on the television series Cheers, but she had a long and storied film career, and she's always like very natural and very, very good.
Frances Sternhagen is still alive.
Yay!
She is 89. She is 89 years old.
And she's gonna die before this episode airs. You realize that?
Because you said it. Yeah, probably.
I know. I'm sorry, Frances. I love you.
Again, I think the big takeaway that I have for this episode is that I still don't know what Sugar Ray Leonard is doing in it. That is still one of the most bizarre cameo appearances of any Tales from the Crypt episode, without a doubt. And
Tom Hanks is a big boxing fan.
Yeah, I guess must be. And pretty much everybody who is in this episode is great. I mean, Henry Gibson, who's awesome in everything. Recognize him
he's
as
always reliable.
Yeah, you might recognize him as one of the Illinois Nazis from the Blues Brothers.
Absolutely, or the sort of patriarch of that clan of cannibals in The Burbs. Or back on Laugh-In. He was on Laugh-In, back in the 60s. Henry Gibson is always good, man. He's got a strange sort of menace for such a tiny man who seemingly is ineffectual, but he's really good in this episode.
Yeah, and he's kind of given the usual "Oh, madam, there's summoned to see you," and he's given the suspicious butler role. I think it works perfectly. I think that this episode is a lot of fun, but yeah, I wish that the ending was a little bit less telegraphed. Because once he's in the crypt that, get it? The mausoleum.
Aha!
Hey,
the crypt.
That's the name of the show. That once he's in the mausoleum, nothing good is going to come of it.
And, well, I mean, there's degrees to what could have come of it. I was certainly hoping for something better than we got. I mean, I like the idea of all of these undead victims of him coming back and taking their vengeance, but it's just so out of left field. It made no sense at all. I mean, in retrospect, he kind of sets it up in that, they kind of linger a little too long on the gravedigger for the second wife. But it's unearned. Also, on just a purely criminal level, this is a guy who is marrying old women and then inheriting their fortunes after he has murdered them. But there is a subplot going on where he is already under investigation for that.
And yet his police aren't following him or anything?
Yeah, and his immediate reaction is well, they're following me for they're investigating me for this one and perhaps a second one. We need to make some quick cash. I'm going to marry another one and kill her quickly. Wait, what?
Yeah, it's a little odd.
That's not the way it works.
Well, look, again, to me, it's a little bit of that Tales from the Crypt suspension, right? This is a Tales from the Crypt episode. You got to suspend your disbelief a little bit.
And I'm willing to do that in certain areas.
But this is a little dumb.
Yeah, not in the area of pure logic. In that case, you need to make everything... it's every supernatural thing. In order for a supernatural plot line to work, everything else has to be completely and totally valid. And they did not fulfill either here.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And ultimately, I wish Treat Williams' death was more graphic. There is nothing, you don't see it. It's one of those oh no, the monsters are coming at the screen, and that's it. And that's super lame. It's Tales from the Crypt. Show something, please.
Yeah, and the makeup on the sort of zombie elderly women is not all that great either.
The last one is good, where it's essentially just a skeleton, where the eye falls out. But the other two are just let's just put some lumpy flesh colored makeup with some green goo, and that's it. Really?
Yeah, I know, and I think those were probably the actual actresses under that thing.
It sure seems that way.
Yeah, and should not have been. They should have gotten some skeletal person and done the makeup on them, and then just had Frances Sternhagen and whoever the other actress was do their voices. That would have been totally valid. Yeah, no, I say no.
Yeah, it's not great.
What? And again, who's programming over at HBO? I get it. It's Tom Hanks. He was a huge fucking star. He's still a huge fucking star. And you want to showcase him, and you're beginning season 4, but did they not learn anything from the first season? You have to lead with your strongest. I don't care what the episode was, how far along it was. You need to go with that.
Yeah, I agree. This is not a great way to start this 4th season, and it's weird, but it's a watch from me, not a skip.
Yeah, I guess ultimately this is the softest of watches, but I do think it's valid. I do think these performances are good. I think it achieves a level of seriousness that I'm always looking for in Tales from the Crypt, and it's shot in such a way that it actually feels like a short film and not necessarily yet another episode of Tales from the Crypt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't just feel like a soundstage somewhere.
Yeah, let's point that out. It is remarkably well shot. It feels like a tiny film instead of just we're on a set somewhere.
Which, high five, Tom Hanks, you did a good job. A very good job.
Yeah, 100%. The material could be better.
Speaking of good jobs, let's talk about This'll Kill Ya. So, like I mentioned, this episode aired right after None But the Lonely Heart. It is directed by Robert Longo, written by Gilbert Adler, and stars Sonia Braga, Dylan McDermott, and Cleavon Little in his final on-screen appearance in anything. Cleavon Little is this is going to be a big bummer for this episode because this is his last performance, and yep. Cleavon Little is amazing. If you've never seen Blazing Saddles, please go out and do that immediately. He is fantastic in Blazing Saddles. The episode features Dylan McDermott as a dickhead boss who tells his two colleagues that they need to start human testing now on a new virus. Maybe. It's a very muddled episode. Honestly, this episode is fucking garbage. I absolutely cannot remember how much I disliked this episode until I watched it again, but this episode's fucking trash. I really don't like it.
Yeah, I mean...
And it's even worse compounded by the fact this is the last time Cleavon Little had an acting job. This is the last thing he ever did.
Is it as bad as Orson Welles' Unicron in the Transformers movie?
It is worse because I feel like Cleavon Little at the end of his career wasn't becoming a complete and utter psychotic like Orson Welles was.
Okay, that's valid. That being said, I think Cleavon Little is really good in this episode. Dylan McDermott is a little overwrought, and let's talk about Sonia Braga for a second because she's one of these actresses who came along and everyone was saying how sexy and alluring she was, and I've never found her to be that. I've always found her to be very off-putting, and yet again, she fulfills that role here. I thought this was kind of an interesting episode in that, for the first third or so of it, it seemed like it was going to be not necessarily a body horror one, although they should have really leaned into that. But yet another thriller, not a love triangle, so you get points for that. But it seemed as if it was an interesting, or at least an attempting to be an interesting episode, sort of about these characters and the kind of the sort of sexual aspect of it, which is not often that explored on Tales from the Crypt.
And oh my god, the sexual aspect of this episode has not aged well.
No, I mean it's one of these things where it's like an attempted rape becomes foreplay. Which seemed to be prevalent a lot back in the 1980s. Like she really does want it, kind of an idea, and then after a few moments of sort of forcing her to do it, she does get into it. But
by the way, if a woman says no,
yeah,
that means no. Tales from the Crypt.
That's just across the board.
Yeah, it has not aged well. it is so off-putting that, again, it, like, similarly to a film I just watched, It Chapter 2, like, if there is a scene in a movie that is so off-putting from the get-go that it makes you check out, you've lost me completely. And this is, like, this scene takes place rather early in the episode, and I checked out completely afterwards, because I was like, this is just, like, okay, so I don't really care what happens to Dylan McDermott's character, because he's clearly a piece of shit.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Like, I think any form of storytelling is valid. And I sound like a rapist now. Any form of storytelling is valid. I know. I think any form of storytelling is valid if it pays off in some way. And I was kind of waiting for that moment later in the episode. I'm not sure how you could have paid it off. I guess if they paid me HBO money to write an episode, I would have done it. But the fact is, it's just sort of there as that sort of lazy trope from the 80s. I guess they kind of went away in the 90s, didn't it? I mean, for the good. I mean, there are probably some, like sexualized thrillers still being shot out there that traffics in this sort of thing, but I at the time it was happening, I didn't check out completely. I was just hoping that we were going to get more a payoff from this dynamic of these two characters, and instead they were not interested in it at all. Clearly, Gilbert Adler was just playing into the they really want it, even if they're saying no aspect.
Yeah, and like you said, the comeuppance that Dylan McDermott's character gets at the end is not anything. It's pretty telegraphed. Way
telegraphed. Like, yeah, I mean...
Oh, it turns out they were just messing with you to teach you a lesson, and you bludgeoned Cleavon Little to death with a baseball bat. I hate this, like, no, wait, I need to clunk. Like, that is a Tales from the Crypt thing that it happens so much that the impact of doing it is so obvious now that I just don't care.
Yeah, you can't have a character attempt to reveal something and then the lead character kill him before the revelation comes and not expect the audience to go, oh, it's completely the opposite. And I'm sure we all thought... I honestly have no recollection of watching this episode when it first aired. So effectively, this was my first viewing of the episode. And... whereas, at least in the Tom Hanks one, I pretty much thought I knew where we were going, and then they went somewhere else. Even as unsatisfying as where the destination was in the Tom Hanks episode, this was telegraphed from the get-go, and it was just a slow ride to this fucking boring ending. Which is a shame, because... I gotta say, I did like in the previous episode, I did like the direction of it. It never felt set-bound. It felt like a little movie, which I appreciated. Robert Longo is one of those guys where, sort of dabbling in cinema. Didn't he direct Johnny Mnemonic?
I think so.
Pretty sure he did, which is a huge failure of a movie. And I'm going to lay all the blame at his feet because that's one of the best scripts I've ever read, and was very excited for that.
That was the last film he directed.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Again, like it isn't often I get to get a script in my hands before it goes into production, but that is one of them. And I was so knocked out by that screenplay. I thought this is going to be one of the best movies of all time, and what we got on screen was Robert Longo's vision of it, which I'm sure there were other circumstances involved. Nevertheless, I think this one is actually pretty well directed. I think the failure here is the screenplay and not the direction. Nevertheless, this is a garbage of an episode. Garbage pail. A dumpster fire, if you will.
Yeah, it's not great. The ending is very obvious. Dylan McDermott... it's just that usual. There's so many tropes in this episode that have been recycled. That's like from other things, or you've seen it a million times. Like, oh, they're gonna teach him a lesson, or we gotta start human trials. Like, oh my god, is there gonna be a fucking science story told? A science horror story told that doesn't start with we need to start human trials is like the underlying like motivation. Like, it's so dumb. It's so overplayed. It's so unoriginal.
It's very much Abracadabra but written and directed by idiots.
Wow, that's a nice way of putting it. It's you know the movie Hollow Man? Take everything stupid about that movie, amp it up to 10. It's nothing like Hollow Man except for the human trials. Like, the human trials thing really makes me mad because it's like, can we tell an interesting science horror story without, we need to start human trials? Like, oh, God.
Here's the thing. Like, you could actually make an interesting movie or, like, a short film about that. But, like, this was not interested in that. This was just yet another, even though technically it's not a love triangle story, it really is, because we have the three characters, and two are conspiring against the other, and, I honestly don't understand why they didn't actually inject him with the fucking formula and, let it play out that way, again, I mentioned body horror, but this could have been the Tales from the Crypt body horror episode with him mutating and turning into something else. There are a million different ways they could have gone, and instead they just chose the same fucking boring, I don't trust you, you don't trust me, oh, there's a misunderstanding, and now I've murdered you, but, I don't know, man.
Yeah, and look, if it's stupid, that's one thing, but you know what it really is? More than everything else, what it really is just lazy. It's just lazy.
It is. Nobody was pushing themselves in any direction here. Ultimately, look, I'm not going to recommend this episode, but...
No, I'm not even... this is not even close.
But the only thing I could recommend this episode to anyone is Cleavon Little, because I think he's really good in it. It's weird because he's almost unrecognizable. If you know him from Blazing Saddles and watch the two back to back, maybe you would know it was him if you didn't see the credits at the beginning. But he's really good and interesting. In fact, I had forgotten that he was in the episode, and while I was watching it, I was just like, oh my god, yeah, this guy's really good. What else did he do?
At this point in his career, he was very deep in the stages of colorectal cancer. So.
Yeah, you can tell. I mean, he's very gaunt in the episode, so he doesn't look like himself.
No.
And you know what? As sort of sad as it is that he's involved in this as his last thing, you cannot fault him in any way because he's giving 100%. So I think he's remarkable in the episode. I almost want to recommend it just for that reason, but everything else is so muddle-headed that it's just a failure.
Yeah, it's a total skip for me. Like I said, I really detest this episode for a number of reasons, but it's just lazy. It wastes Cleavon Little. There could have been so much more going on, and instead it's just a very rote by the books, heavy trope leaning, soundstage looking mess.
Skip it.
Skip it big time. So, on the next episode of Chronicles from the Crypt, we're going to be taking a look at Season 4, Episode 3 and 4 on A Dead Man's Chest and Seance. Don't really remember either one of them. I do remember that Kathy Moriarty is in Seance, so...
Kathy Moriarty. Always good.
And I believe Dean Wormer from Animal House is also in Seance.
Vernon Wells.
Yes.
No, not Vernon Wells.
John Vernon.
Wells. John Vernon. I'm conflating two actors entirely. One is a mutant warrior from the Road Warrior films, and one is the esteemed dean of Faber College.
Yes. Fat, drunk, and stupid are no ways to go through life, son.
That's true. And, well, we'll talk about it then, but, he's the voice of the prosecutor in the Bernie Wrightson adapted heavy metal episode in Captain Stern in the film Heavy Metal. He's so good in it.
I mean, he's just
voice.
He's just a great actor in general.
Yeah, I love him.
So until then, where can people find you, Father Malone?
Other than here, you can always find me on Dreams for Sale, the Twilight Zone 1985 podcast that I co-host with you and our good friend Mike White. You can also find me on my own YouTube channel, Ot5 Films, where I do movie reviews in the form of a series called You've Never Seen. I've also got a new series on there called Unaired Pilots, which I would appreciate it if you would go and check out. And I don't know. I guess you can also find me on the Culture Cast a lot.
Yeah, it's true. So the Culture Cast is my podcast that I do once to twice a week, depends. If there's a new movie out worth talking about, where I talk about movies with a revolving door of guests, and Mike is one of them. Father Malone is one of them also. Mike White is also one of them. It's a long story. So you can find me there at the Culture Cast. You can find me on Twitter at Casualty_Chris. Big thanks as always to John Kassir for the intro to Chronicles from the Crypt, and we'll catch you on the next episode.